Well, Liz Weiss, I just have to say, I feel younger and smarter already just being with you on the podcast today. Liz Weiss, a longtime friend and colleague, certainly an expert in nutrition. We're both registered dietitian nutritionists. And Liz, you've done some good work in the area of brain health. And, we've heard about brain food. And obviously on your website, it says, Liz Weiss, which is Liz's Healthy Table, eat, drink, live longer, but also you're talking about not just living longer, but living better. And what are they talking about? Like health span now. So tell us about what really got you into the connection between not just our bodies and our health, but really specifically our brains.
Right. You mentioned health span, but there's also brain span because you could be healthy physically, but if your brain is not healthy, then there's really not that quality of life. So my dad suffered from Lewy Body Dementia for many years. And that's finally how he passed from that disease. And so I became increasingly concerned about my own health because my uncle died from Lewy body dementia as well. So I'm like, oh gosh, feels a little too close for comfort. So I've really started to personally focus on what can I eat to not just feed my brain, but really nurture the health of my brain and improve the brain span, i.e. the lifespan of my brain. And I talk to my family about this all the time, and I talk about it online all the time because there are so many things we can do and things we can eat to improve the health of our brains.
Well, let's jump right in there. And again, folks, obviously we're not neurologists, we're not gerontologists. So, the folks who really specialize in the health of aging people, we are registered dietitians. And so the cool thing about what we do is we look at the science, right, Liz? And then we translate it into what you put in your shopping cart. What recipes you might choose, what you're going to cook, what you're going to order from a restaurant menu. So why don't we just start with, are there a few foods that seem to rank pretty high on the good from a brain scale?
Yes. So there are everyday foods that you can add to your shopping cart. There's a diet that we talk about a lot in our nutrition community called the MIND diet. It stands for Mediterranean Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. And it's a mashup of two diets, the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. The DASH diet is a diet for hypertension. And those two diets, it appears, when they're combined together, can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease and can improve the health of the brain and reduce that risk of dementia. So there are about 9 foods. Yep, 9 foods on the MIND diet. And I'm going to rattle through them real quick. Let's see if I can remember them because I've been trying to eat these foods. Oh boy.
I remember one was blueberries, but I can't remember the others. So I do need help.
Yeah, there goes your street cred, lady. So berries certainly is on the MIND diet. We want to eat them often. Beans, nuts, whole grains, seafood, poultry, colorful vegetables,
Colorful
vegetables, olive oil. And did I say whole grains? Let me look at my list here because I had a cheat sheet going somewhere.
You mentioned nuts, but is there any particular kind of nuts that seem to be winning the game here?
Did I mention leafy green vegetables?
You didn't. Leafy greens.
Leafy greens.
We have got to work on our memory here. No, I'm joking.
Well, in the show notes, you got to give that list. But leafy greens is like number one. Okay. And what was your question?
About the nuts. Is there a particular nut that seems to be, I don't know.
All nuts.
Better?
All nuts. No, all nuts, because nuts contain unsaturated fat, and unsaturated fats, interestingly, help to keep our blood cholesterol in check, help to lower the so-called bad LDL cholesterol, which lowers heart disease risk. And if you think about it, if you have a low risk of heart disease, if your heart is healthy, if your circulation is healthy, then blood's getting to your brain, and that keeps your brain healthier. What's good for the brain is good for the heart. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. It goes both ways. It's really, we want to be thinking about head to toe health, but if you're just talking brain health, that MIND diet with those 9 foods, you want to incorporate them into your diet frequently. And with those dark green leafy vegetables, kale, spinach, collard greens, if you can get them in your diet every day, that's going to improve your brain span. Got to go for those greens.
And as you said, a bunch of other stuff too. So I was, of course, Googling around in preparation for my conversation with you because you've really been involved in this, and I'm just was so fascinated. So again, the green veggies, berries, as you mentioned, fish, but specifically, is it the fatty fish? I mean, talk us through the seafood categories that maybe we should be, I don't know, choosing more often.
Yes. Well, we want to eat seafood at least once a week, but preferably twice a week. Really, any kind of seafood, as long as it's not deep fried. And of course, it's, the company you keep. So, what are you serving with it? But the best seafood for overall brain health is the fatty fish. And that would be fish like salmon and sardines. If you're a super fan of sardines, go for it. But those fatty fish have omega-3 fats. And omega-3 fats are such an important part of your brain cells. And we need them. If you think about your brain cells, it's like a balloon. Each cell's like a balloon, but we want to let chemical messages and nutrients get in and out of the brain cells easily. So you want that membrane to have a nice sort of flowy vibe to it. You want things to get in and out easily, the good stuff in, the bad stuff out. And because your brain cells, that lining is made up primarily of omega-3 fats, you want to have them in your diet so that it keeps the membrane of the balloon or the membrane of your cells as healthy as possible. And so the omega-3 fats, yes, you can get them from walnuts. Yes, you can get them from chia seeds. Yes, you can get them from flaxseed. The amount in the vegetarian or non-fish sources, not as potent. So the most potent is in your fatty fish.
Okay. All right. Now, as dietitians, we also care about people's personal health, right? Their personal preferences. So, Liz, I have a problem. I don't like salmon. Okay. I mean, I would not eat salmon, ready for this, if my life depended on it. And apparently it does. But no, I'll have it every once in a while. I mean, I'll have the smoked salmon, with bagels and the cream cheese and the capers. But what about tuna? What about other kind of fatty fish? What else can I
Yeah,
have?
there are supplements you can take, and you can do algae supplements, you can do fish oil supplements, you can consume that vegetarian sources. But again, that fish, especially the fatty fish, is the best source. But you know what? If you like a milder white fish or you like shrimp, let's say, there's some omega-3 in those types of seafood sources. So go for those too. And if you don't love something, then don't eat it. Hey, listen, we're all about flavor. I could talk about nutrition all day long, but if the food doesn't taste great, if it's not affordable, if it's not, if it doesn't sort of vibe with your personal and your cultural food preferences, then it doesn't make sense, right? So each person is so different, so unique.
Okay, so I know you've got some wonderful recipes, Liz, and certainly at Liz's Healthy Table, her website, and we're going to have show notes and links to recipes, but sell me on salmon.
Oh, yeah.
Give me a recipe, Liz, that you think, wow, Carolyn might just like this. Keep in mind, probably the reason I don't like it is because my mother is Scottish, and she never liked salmon because she grew up in Scotland where I think there was just SOS, sick of salmon. There was just too much of it. And so we never had it growing up because I guess mom didn't want it, right? So then I don't know. I guess maybe I hadn't been exposed to good ways of eating it. What would you say is a super yummy recipe for
Okay.
salmon?
Let me just share your pain though, because my mother, I grew up not eating cooked oatmeal, because she was traumatized by her mother growing up eating oatmeal. And so I think I must have been like 50 years old the first time I had a bowl of oatmeal, and I like it. Mom, what did you do to me? Because we want those whole grains. Anyway, so salmon, couple of ideas. The first, you can buy, and it's very economical, you can buy convenient pouches or cans of pink salmon, boneless, skinless. Okay. If you get the salmon with the bones, yes, you're going to get some calcium, but you're going to get some bones too. And that I don't find particularly pleasant. So we just get the pink salmon, no bones, no skin. Flake up that 2 cans of that salmon. And then you can add a little bit of light mayonnaise to it, some breadcrumbs, maybe some chopped up orange bell pepper, kind of blends right in, a little bit of reduced fat cheese, maybe cheddar cheese, some chopped up chives, and make little patties. And then cook them in a skillet with some olive oil, also on the Mind diet. And then you have these nice little cakes, if you will, that you could serve over a salad. You could serve with veggies on the side. And it tastes mild, surprisingly. Now, you can do this with tuna as well if you want to, baby step your way into salmon.
I mean, I
So that's
love
one
canned tuna.
thing.
We all do, love that. A tuna fish salad sandwich
Mhm.
is probably a delicious thing. So what you're saying is it's not just the tuna steaks and things like that. I do like, hold on, the Faroe Island salmon that they have at restaurants. It's generally pretty expensive, but it's super good. So maybe
Mm.
that's my tastes are just too high. But anyway, and a grilled salmon maybe. Well, moving on to the foods, other foods besides salmon and tuna and the sardines, and we're not going to throw the sardines away. There's some
Mm-mm.
great, things for sardines and tin fish, and traveling to
Mm.
Spain, of course, sardine land, and so many different ways to enjoy it there. Now, I want to talk a little bit about to round this out. I've also seen on this list tea and coffee because we're talking about foods here, but what about beverages? What do you know about that? What do you know about the tea and the coffee?
Well, tea contains antioxidants, and it's sort of a treasure trove, a powerhouse of antioxidants. And antioxidants, and by the way, you get them from fruits and vegetables and beans because beans are very colorful. It really comes with foods that impart color, green tea, black tea, that's color. And antioxidants help to reduce inflammation in the body. They help to get rid of free radicals which form from oxidation. These are like natural processes that occur in the body, and they help to kind of like get all that pollution out of your body, if you will. And so a cup of tea a day, certainly a great way to bring
I'm
antioxidants into
having
the
a cup of
diet.
tea right now, Liz. And a matter of fact, to make me even smarter, I put it in a cup from Oxford University here. And so it's making me feel pretty smart here. Cheers to that. A study came out to back up exactly what you're saying just in September of 2024. And it was done in the UK, not at Oxford, but it was consuming tea, red wine, and other flavonoid. Get ready, folks. We're going to talk a little sciencey, flavonoidy stuff here in a minute. And other flavonoid-rich foods promote healthier brain aging, according to a new study.
Hmm.
And what they found was that, and this was, real live people that they were studying, and they found that dementia risk went down by 28%. And these were people who were older and they already had like high blood pressure, and they also had a higher genetic risk of dementia. So it's an interesting study. 120,000 participants, Liz. I mean, this is a big deal. Again, new stuff just out in the fall of 2024. And so we always want to ask how much, what were they eating, right? And how much? I mean, what does it take? Well, thanks for asking. Um, they had 5 servings of tea a day, one of the red wine, and a half a serving of berries. Okay. But this was
Mm.
about flavonoids. And, you mentioned the plant nutrients, the antioxidants. So flavonoid is one of those, right?
Right. That is
Yeah.
that is
So,
true.
and, so isn't it's, we're really getting to learn a lot more about the specifics of not just what foods, but how much and how often. And it
Right,
does
right.
seem, end of the day, it's pretty often. You can't, this is not just a one-off situation where I think I'm going
Mm.
to have a piece of salmon and a cup of tea. It
Right,
has
right.
to be a lifestyle, right?
Yeah, and when you go back and look at that Mind diet list, red wine is on it. I said there were 9 foods. Well, there's one beverage, and it is red wine. And they found that people who consume 1 glass of red wine a day, and by the way, a glass is equal to 5 ounces because we want to stick to those portions when we're talking about serving sizes. So 1 glass of red wine a day, if you already consume wine, I'm not saying go out and start drinking wine, but if you enjoy wine, that can also be part of the Mind diet. And so it's about foods. It's about amounts, and it's about an eating pattern because we could say, I'm going to eat green leafy vegetables every day and all my troubles will go away. Well, it doesn't work that way. It's the whole package, right? So not only do we want to eat these foods on the Mind diet, which is very fruit and veggie heavy and whole grain and nuts and beans and
And those
seafood and all
healthy
that good
fats you
stuff.
were talking about in the nuts, in the
Oh
fish, in
yeah.
the olive
Hmm.
oil.
Right.
Okay.
Got to have those good fats. But it's yeah, it's that whole package, that whole lifestyle. And we want to keep that in mind. There's no like one superfood, but there's many superfoods combined is really powerful.
Well, here's the deal too, if we've got brain boosters, then there's got to be brain bashers, right?
You're
Okay.
reading my mind. I was just about
Ooh,
I
okay.
knew there was something I wanted to mention, and as I was talking, I'm like, "What the heck? What did I want to say?" And then you literally read my mind. Thank you, Carolyn.
You're welcome.
There are certain foods when we're talking about the mind diet and that research, they found that yes, these foods are important. This style of eating is important, but it's also there are also certain foods in there who could that can sabotage your efforts. So eating too much saturated fat. So that's like the marbling and the red meat and the full fat dairy. Too much saturated fat can raise your cholesterol and your LDL, bad for heart disease risk, right? And I talked about before, you want to have good blood
Mm-hmm.
flow through the body. So we want to get the saturated fat down and replace it with those healthy unsaturated fats, and omega-3s are one of them. We also want to get the refined sugars down. I'm not saying never eat a piece of chocolate, never enjoy that beautiful slice of cake or whatever, that pie, but keep that refined sugar intake down because it often displaces the good stuff we're talking about. And then the highly processed foods. I don't like using the term processed because there's a lot of so-called processed foods that are so good for us. Orange juice. I know you like orange juice. A can of beans, tofu. Those are all quote unquote processed, right?
Right.
Bread,
Process
whole
is
grain
it's a
bread.
noun, it's a verb. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a process, but it's the heavily processed food. And that when we start talking about that style of a diet, a lot of fast food, a lot of sugar, a lot of salt, a lot of saturated fat, that's the standard American diet, unfortunately. People call it the SAD diet, the
Oh,
typical Western diet. So we want to make that shift to more of a Mediterranean diet, or let's not forget about a traditional Japanese diet or a Chinese diet where there's a lot of soy foods like tofu. There's lots of vegetables. There's lots of tea going on in those cultures. So you can eat a traditional diet from an Asian country, from a Mediterranean country. There's so many cultures down from South America that we can borrow from and turn that into an eating pattern that's really good for the brain.
right. It's not a cookie cutter situation. You can certainly work in the recipes and foods from all the different cultures and communities around the world. I just thought of something. Tea, speaking of culture and community, here in the South, we do enjoy a little sweet tea, and sometimes there's so much sugar in it. I mean, you could literally stand a spoon in it. It's pretty thick. And so I just thought of that, folks. Hey, as registered dietitian Carol O'Neill, Atlanta, Georgia, your sweet tea may not be as good for the brain as just the unsweetened, but I don't want to bring you down. I don't want to make you sad. So let's just compromise. Maybe you'd like to use 80% unsweetened tea and 20% sweet, or maybe you can get to a 90-10, 90% unsweetened tea, 10% sweet, or lemonade, make an Arnold Palmer. So again, you're not giving up the flavors you love and what you like and what's familiar to you, but you're making a change for the better. And you talked about red wine, but alcohol, of course, in excess has been associated with not exactly great for your brain.
No, it
I
is
just have a
not.
coaster, a little napkin here, which I pulled out from a tea, and I know y'all can't see it, but I'll read it. It says on the napkin, a cocktail napkin says, drinking can cause memory loss, or even worse, memory loss. Liz, I know you wanted to talk about we're laughing right now, and laughter is the best medicine. And you were talking about a lot of the studies in keeping our brains active and healthy, and maybe even battling dementia along the way is the joy of being with other people
Mm.
and avoiding loneliness. And it brings me to a couple of memories of you and I, Liz,
Oh.
traveling with colleagues to go on food tours, when we would be in different countries. And the one that comes to mind, because I think a food tour, it's joyful. You're learning stuff, you're experiencing culture with friends, you're tasting new things. It broadens your brain with like, what's the history of this food, but also your taste buds. And we were in Paris with our colleague Janet Helm,
Mhm.
who, by the way, has a podcast with us on food trends for 2025. And remember, we went to Belleville, which was a part of Paris that we weren't necessarily familiar
Yes.
with.
Like the Brooklyn of Paris, the hipster part of
It kind
Paris.
of was, or maybe,
Uh-huh.
Brooklyn is the Belleville of New York,
Yeah, more
but,
like it.
how does that kind of an experience you think really help with our, overall mental health and brain
Mm.
health?
Well, I will say that being with others, whether you're dining with others or you're just taking a walk with someone, like we know that loneliness is so bad for longevity. And we know that being with other people is so stimulating and so joyful and it makes us happy. So it's so important for lifespan and for brain span. Anytime you can learn something new, try something new, you're firing up all these synapses in the brain and it's stimulating the brain, and that's good for the brain. So not only do we want to be eating well and moving our bodies, exercising, that gets that blood flow going, but we want to be joyful. And so eating with other people, I was actually just talking to a friend who traveled alone to Belfast. She had needed to use up a flight and whatever. Off she went to Belfast. It's direct from Boston, and she went alone. And I said, "Oh my gosh, how was it?" Because she hadn't traveled alone before. She said, "It was so great, but the one thing I didn't do was go into a pub." I said, "You should have gone." She said, "I just felt
Yeah,
too
you won't
shy
be
to."
lonely in a pub, for
No,
maybe
you
more than
will.
5 minutes.
No, you will not. She just didn't feel brave enough to
Yeah,
go in. But
yeah.
had she
Oh,
been
I
brave
get it.
enough, she would have had a great time, I bet. And then been in community, hopefully just had, the one beer or the one glass of red wine. But just so important that we're always learning, trying new things, and expanding our horizons. My mother does a crossword every day. She's 92. I'm telling you, she's so sharp. I couldn't do the crossword. As much of those green leafy vegetables, darn it, that I've been eating, I cannot do the crossword.
Well, we
So
can
there you have it.
exercise our bodies and we can exercise our brains. And Liz, one of the things, your superpowers as we come to the end here of our discussion today is recipe development.
Mhm.
You do a lot of recipe development. Of course, you've written cookbooks and have lots of recipes that you've done for friends and clients and businesses and just community groups, teaching cooking classes. Thank you for everything that you do to not only, I don't know, communicate the good words about good nutrition, but really help people make it happen and easy and delicious. And I can't wait to have you back on the podcast and see what you're up to next. I promise to try your salmon recipe and report back. And, but I will continue drinking my tea because that is something I've always done. And I feel like it does give my brain a little lift without the jitteriness of too much
Mhm.
caffeine. Because it's L-theanine, people, where you get really nerdy here, that's in tea, in the black tea. And that apparently helps our brain's alpha waves be more alert and yet not jittery. So, Liz, thanks so much. And I look forward to having you back again.
Well, I look forward to coming back, and I'm going to toss one more challenge your way. To build on the salmon challenge, you need to drink smoothies, Carolyn. Homemade smoothies. I'm gonna send you a recipe for a green smoothie with baby spinach and baby kale that is so good for your
All
brain.
right,
And I'm
game on. As long as there's
game
no
on.
salmon in the basmatic in the blender, I'm happy with that. Okay, thanks, Liz.
Thanks, Carolyn.